Gary worked at a prestigious law firm in New York City called Jennings & Sons. He was highly regarded at the firm for his skill in winning even the most complex cases. Today, he was about to tackle another challenging case. The court hearing involved a lawsuit filed by a blind man who lost his sight due to a nurse administering a medication that should not have been given to a diabetic patient on insulin. The plaintiff claimed that he had informed the nurse about his diabetes. However, East Hudson Hospital refused to acknowledge the nurse's mistake and, therefore, denied any responsibility for the incident, accusing the blind patient of lying. The hospital insisted that the plaintiff had not disclosed his diabetes, and therefore, they were not obliged to cover any expenses. Gary's task as the attorney was to prove the hospital's innocence. East Hudson Hospital was very wealthy and generously compensated lawyers who defended their side, while the plaintiff, Mr. Anderson, was a financially disadvantaged individual who relied on the services of a public defender. During the jury trial, Gary employed cunning and subtle manipulations to convince the court that the blind plaintiff, who had lost his sight, was an alcoholic and not responsible for his actions. Thus, he implied that the plaintiff shifted the blame onto the hospital without informing the doctors about his diabetes. The plaintiff had a history of alcoholism to some extent, but there was no evidence to suggest that he was intoxicated at the time of the incident at the hospital. However, it seemed easy at times to overlay someone's entire life with what they might have mistakenly or otherwise done in the past.
Folks, we've been here for a long time now, listening to people talk for weeks.
Gary spoke at his last and, as it turned out, decisive speech.
Complicated medical testimony. A lot of emotion in this case. There is not a person in this room who isn't sorry about what happened to Mr. Anderson. It's a tragedy. And when something like this happens, you desperately want to blame someone, don't you? Someone else. We understand that. It's natural. What have we got here? What's the bottom line? It's Mr. Anderson word against the East Hudson Hospital, isn't it? That's exactly what it is. Now, obviously, any decent human being would want to believe Mr. Anderson. Believe that he told the admitting nurse, Mrs. Lopez, that he was diabetic. It would seem, poetic, that someone else was to blame. It would feel right. But, it wouldn't be fair. Let's think for a moment. Who's being blamed here? It's not some big, bad hospital corporation. We're talking about human beings, 3 doctors, 4 nurses, the hospital chief of staff present at the time. All of them there for no other purpose than to try and save Mr. Anderson's life. I don't like doing this, but if we're all going to do our jobs, I've got to bring this up again. Mr. Anderson is an alcoholic. In June of 2001 he tried to commit suicide. And even I was surprised to learn from the plaintiff's own doctors, ironically, that this tragedy could have been caused by the abuse of alcohol. So here's my point: we all understand why Mr. Anderson is blaming the hospital. But nobody could have prevented Mr. Anderson's suffering. Except Mr. Anderson.
The court ruled in favor of the hospital. We find for the defendant on all counts. The unfortunate patient, who not only lost his sight during his hospital stay but was also left alone with his problems, had only his wife by his side. Gary coldly looked at them in the courtroom, feeling like it might be the last time, and walked out to celebrate his triumph. The management of the law firm congratulated Gary on winning the case.
That was great, Gary. Like father, like son.
Yeah. The old bastard would have loved this one.
Gary replied, crudely showing that he was a worthy successor to his father, one of the founders of the influential law firm. Gary had a family, a wife, and a daughter. They were planning to enroll their daughter in a prestigious educational institution. The family arranged their affairs and trips, meeting influential friends. But one evening, before going with his wife to visit their important friends, Gary decided to make a quick run to the nearest tobacco store to buy his favorite cigarettes.
A pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes, please,
he said to the salesman in a hurry, holding dollars in his hand, but the salesman did not respond. Standing next to him was a strange young man who terrified the helpless shopkeeper. Gary repeated his order, adding,
"If you're busy, I can wait."
But suddenly the man standing with the shopkeeper quickly pulled out a gun he had been hiding under his jacket and aimed it at Gary.
"Oh, damn it,"
Gary said bitterly.
Give me your wallet.
The robber shouted at him.
"Give me a break. I just want cigarettes,"
said Gary, bewildered. Suddenly a shot rang out. The robber shot Gary and hit him in the collarbone. Gary looked at the wound and saying in shock,
"All right, wait a second."
But suddenly a second shot rang out, hitting his head.
"Okay, wait a minute. I just need cigarettes,"
said a shocked Gary. He managed to take a few more steps towards the exit and collapsed to the ground from a gunshot wound to the head. The criminal quickly fled the store. In Gary's luxurious apartment, his young wife was waiting for him.
They should sew the keys to his hand,
she said, talking on the phone when suddenly the police called the apartment. The police were at the doorstep. His wife quickly rushed to the specified hospital. Her husband lay unconscious, with his head bandaged and on artificial respiration. At the hospital room, grief-stricken, the woman was awaited by employees of the law firm. They tried to console her, saying,
"We're with you, Jane."
At home, Jane tried to comfort her daughter, who asked,
"What did the neurosurgeon say?"
he doesn't know.
Days passed, and suddenly Gary opened his eyes. The surprised nurse ran to get the doctor. And later, Jane came in.
Hi, sweetheart,
she said, but Gary didn't respond, just stared with a fixed and incomprehensible gaze. Gary's attending physician invited Jane to talk about her husband's condition.
"Your husband's incredibly lucky. The bullet wound to the head caused minimal damage. See, it hit the right frontal lobe,"
the doctor told Jane, showing X-rays of her husband's head.
"That's the only part of the brain that has redundant systems. If you're going to get shot in the head, that's the way to do it. But I can't lie to you. I wish I had all good news. The other bullet hit the subclavian artery. There was excessive internal bleeding and cardiac arrest. Your husband suffered anoxia. It's a lack of oxygen to the brain, and the anoxia caused some damage. What I'm getting at is that it's going to be a long, tough rehabilitation.
How long?
We'll know a lot more in 2 months. The brain is very mysterious. Even though your husband seems to have the capacity to recover, there's no telling how well or how long it might take. In some ways, he's starting from scratch here. Mrs. Corner, Harry can't speak. He can't move. His motor skills aren't functioning properly. His memory might be deeply affected. Certainly one day, everything might come back, but there are no guarantees. He might not be able to regain his speech or physical coordination ever.
Time passed, and Gary's bandages were removed, and he was transferred to a rehabilitation clinic.
So, how's Dad?
He's doing great, sweetheart.
The mother told the daughter.
The rehabilitation clinic's going to be much better than the hospital. He wants to get better before you see him.
Can we get a puppy?
Maybe we will, honey.
His wife continued to visit him and talk to him, hoping that he would regain his memory. The chief attending physician, Dr. Simon, entered the room and asked him if he remembered who was standing before him. But Gary, looking at his daughter and wife, couldn't say anything. Later, he started receiving specialized therapy. A specialist would place different shapes in front of him and ask him to point out the circle among them. Slowly, Gary began to answer all her questions correctly. Bradley, a specialist in therapeutic exercise and special massage, also joined Gary's rehabilitation. He would sit the patient in a wheelchair and take him to a specialized gym, where he would stretch his body and lift his legs, stimulating and preparing them for walking. He also helped him start speaking. Some girls threw words at Gary's daughter, suggesting that they would end up on the street due to their large expenses. His wife worried because Gary still couldn't speak, recognize them, or walk.
No one knows what will happen next,
she said to her friend, who worked in real estate in New York.
I was at the bank last week. We have almost nothing left, except a few stocks and an apartment that is no longer worth as much as it did 5 years ago. Without Gary's royalties, everything will change soon.
Darling, can I give you some advice? Be careful not to tell anyone what you just told me.
At the clinic, specialists continued to work with Gary, teaching him how to speak. But the traumatized man remained silent. One day, Bradley, the walking specialist, brought Gary to the cafeteria, picked out food according to his taste, and tried to encourage him to say something, anything. After tasting the food, Gary suddenly coughed, spat out something hot, and uttered his first word.
Graham!
The feeding specialist was extremely delighted and asked,
So you want graham crackers? Bring him those crackers quickly!
Graham!
Gary repeated in amazement after a long silence. Days passed, and Gary could now repeat the word
Walker
after the massage therapist, who taught him how to walk. He began to understand what they were teaching him and, under the guidance of the massage therapist, took his first steps, holding on to a walker. His face beamed with joy at these initial successes. Some time passed, and Gary started slowly walking with just a cane, and then without a cane at all, and became capable of keeping up a conversation, with the help of the specialist Bradley, who told him various stories, including one about his brother being betrayed by his wife.
So, my brother gets home, right, goes into his bedroom. There's his wife doing another man. The bitch was cheating.
Cheating?
Doing the serious with another man. Sleeping with another guy.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And she just looks up, and all she says is, oops.
Well, so, then what?
Hey, Jennifer, you look fantastic.
The man shouted at a passing girl.
She's hot.
The massage therapist said, saying about the colleague who ran past them.
Yes, I know. You've become friends with her.
Gary replied slowly. He began to speak gradually. One day, entering his room, the massage therapist saw Gary drawing on a canvas.
What are you doing?
He asked.
I'm drawing crackers.
On the canvas, Gary skillfully painted the word Graham with a thick brush. However, he still could not remember his wife and daughter, so he refused in every way to return home when the masseuse Bradley asked him to prepare to move.
I hardly know them. I live here, and you won't be there,
he exclaimed anxiously.
They will take care of you.
Bradley reassured him.
But I don't want them to take care of me.
Gary shouted.
I just can't remember them.
At that moment, his wife and daughter entered the room.
We thought it's time for you to come back home.
His wife said.
Yes, I've been told.
Gary responded, feeling embarrassed.
But I don't want to go back.
The masseur suggested that his daughter talk to him. She approached and helped him tie his shoelaces.
How did you learn to do this?
He asked.
You taught me yourself.
She replied. Gary held his daughter's hand and suddenly remembered the gray carpet that hung in their home. Somehow, it helped him reconnect with his family, and he decided to go home with them. The masseur, who had taught Gary to walk and talk, bid him a warm farewell, promising that they would meet again. Grateful, his wife kissed him on the cheek.
That's my job,
he said. Upon arriving at their luxurious apartment, Gary first embraced the doorman standing at the entrance, someone he had hardly noticed in his previous life. The doorman was surprised. As he walked through his apartment, Gary marveled at everything and found the new coffee table, which he had cursed and demanded to return to the store before his illness, quite charming. In the evening, his wife told him that he could sleep on the right side of her bed. Surprised, Gary asked,
I should sleep here?
And agreed. She lay her head on his shoulder, and he was astonished. He suddenly remembered the scent of her hair.
I remember your hair,
he exclaimed.
Everything will be fine,
she said, expressing her belief in his continued recovery. The next morning, the three of them sat down to breakfast together for the first time in many years.
You've never had breakfast with us before,
his daughter remarked and accidentally knocked over her juice glass. Expecting to hear the usual reproach from him, she was surprised when her dad said,
It's okay, I often do that too,
and proceeded to overturn his own juice glass. His wife decided to take their daughter to school and asked the maid, who worked for them, to keep an eye on Gary.
Rosa, what did I do when I lived here before?
Gary asked.
You were working,
she replied.
And what did I do when I wasn't working?
You were always working. Welcome back, Mr. Corner.
As Rosa went about her tasks, Gary began to examine the cabinets and belongings in their enormous new apartment. He opened the drawers and looked at what was in them. In one drawer he saw money, and he pocketed it. In another, he saw women's underwear. Then he found some envelopes with letters in them. He looked at them carefully, but could not read them and put them back. The letters were on expensive paper with someone's logo on them. A courier rang the doorbell, delivering groceries. Rosa opened the door and carried the bags to the kitchen. Gary took this opportunity to slip out unnoticed and take a walk outside, greeting everyone he met who knew him from before. He crossed the road with surprise and realized it was on a red light, narrowly avoiding being hit by a car.
Hey, idiot! Get off the road!
Shouted the angry driver. Gary walked through the city as if he were seeing everything for the first time. His wife returned home and was horrified to find her husband missing, so she started calling everyone she could. But soon Gary himself returned home, holding a beautiful puppy he had bought at a store on the way, using the money he had found before in the drawer. His daughter had wanted a puppy for a long time, but her mother was hesitant to get one. His wife was overjoyed that he had found his way back on his own, and Gary was surprised to see how much she had missed him. The next day, his daughter decided to take her father to the library. She chose a book for herself, handed her father a thick magazine, and began writing down what she needed in her notebook. But Gary was very bored, so he started making paper balls and throwing them at his daughter to entertain himself.
Dad, read your book,
she said.
I can't read,
he replied.
I'm sorry.
In the evening, his daughter started teaching him how to read. However, reading in English proved to be very challenging for him. He confused letters and sounds, and his daughter provided him with prompts. Finally, after much effort, he managed to read the phrase,
"You're mine."
and then the word,
"Mom."
was added to the phrase.
"You're my mom."
Overjoyed, Gary dashed around the apartment, shouting,
"I can read!"
and read the label on the cleaning product. His wife was overjoyed. The law firm boss threw a welcome-back party and invited Gary. He came with his wife but didn't understand much of the grandiloquent speech given by the chief of staff. The boss recalled how Gary used to throw his coat and shout in the corridor, demanding a break from work, and wished to hear Gary's familiar voice in the office again. And he proposed a toast to that. All the guests supported the idea, and Gary's wife asked him to say something publicly. Gary weakly said that he hardly remembered anyone present and that he was studying photographs of past events but could only recall a few details about his housekeeper and her pie. The face of the boss, who had known Gary's father, became filled with sadness, but he still tried to support Gary with what little he could say. A week later, Gary came to his law firm. All the employees warmly welcomed him and said,
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
A young beautiful woman named Eden also approached him to greet him.
Hello, Gary, welcome back.
There was a mysterious hope shining in her eyes. She, too, like the firm's boss and Bill, a close friend of Gary's, was very worried when she learned of the bullet wound, and she also came immediately to the hospital to learn about the condition of the victim. Gary was taken to his former office, where he sat at the desk. On the desk in front of him was the case of Anderson versus East Hudson Hospital, which he had been working on before getting injured. Now that he could read, Gary took the case file of the hospital home and tried to study it carefully.
How noble it was to take Gary back to the firm,
people said to the boss. We're all humans after all, he replied. Gary became very interested in the case of East Hudson Hospital, and he asked his secretary to find him more information about it. She went to the archives and brought him all the documents and witness testimonies related to the case. Gary went through everything. Slowly but confidently, he began to compare obvious evidence and facts of the case with impartial and disinterested logic that had suddenly emerged in him after being shot. To his surprise, he discovered that a crucial testimony from a witness had been overlooked in court. At a restaurant where he was invited to have lunch with friends and colleagues, he decided to raise this issue.
Listen, I have a question about the East Hudson Hospital case.
East Hudson Hospital, your famous recent successful case,
replied Eden, a beautiful young lawyer from the same firm as Gary, who was sitting with him.
We argued that the hospital is not liable because we said Anderson didn't inform the doctors about his diabetes,
Gary said.
Yes, that was our main argument, that the hospital is not liable because they didn't know the guy was on insulin.
Bill, his friend from the same firm, replied.
But look, in this case, there was another patient, Mrs. Brown. She heard Anderson warn the nurse about his diabetes, but the nurse didn't note it down in the medical record.
Gary showed his friends the crucial document he had discovered.
We argued that the hospital is not liable, but we didn't mention this lady's testimony in court.
So what?
His old friend from the firm replied.
Listen, Gary, just put this piece of paper in the case and file it away in the archive.
But we acted unfairly,
Gary responded.
The fee was worth it,
his experienced colleague replied, sticking to their previous business mindset. At home, Gary learned that his daughter would soon be leaving to attend a prestigious school. He was deeply saddened by this because he had grown very attached to the girl. They not only learned to read together but also spent a lot of time in the kitchen, making sweets. Initially, He and his wife had quickly decided it would be better for their daughter and for them, but now Gary looked at it differently. He couldn't understand the benefit of parting with his beloved daughter or blatantly lying in court, disregarding the rights of a simple poor sick person for the sake of some special fee. The bullet seemed to have hit not just a section of his brain, impairing certain memory functions, but also struck at the heart of his own selfishness, cold pragmatism and greed. Perhaps someone would say, "Oh, we need more bullets like that in our old, not-so-kind world." His daughter clearly didn't want to leave her parents for the sake of a future benefit she didn't quite understand. And Gary also didn't understand this elusive benefit or why he had to part with his loved one. The decision was now solely up to his wife. They drove the girl to the specialized school she didn't want to attend. The father did his best to cheer her up, inventing a story about his own first day at an unfamiliar school.
Sweetheart, I remember my first day at school very well. There were all these strange kids I didn't know, and they didn't know me. I was scared, but after a couple of days, we all laughed at how scared we had been. Everyone feels the same way you do, my dear.
His daughter hugged him and said,
"Please take care of the dog."
Of course, darling. Everything will be fine. Time will fly by, and we'll be together again soon.
At that moment, a call came in for the grand opening of the school, and her mother hurried the girl along. Sarah reluctantly went to her class with a sad face. Jane turned to Gary in joyful surprise and said,
"Darling, I didn't know you remembered your school."
And I didn't even remember.
Gary replied to her.
I just felt so sorry for Sarah, and I decided to support her with a made-up story.
Jane was deeply touched by Gary's gesture, as he had been very tough and unsympathetic before his injury, not sparing anyone, including their daughter.
"It's amazing how a person can change, and I like this Gary much more than the old one. I wouldn't want the old Gary to ever come back."
They went home together. Evening came, and Jane was getting ready to go to bed.
"Where is Gary? Why is he taking so long?"
She found him on the balcony, leaning on the railing, gazing thoughtfully at the lights of the city.
"Darling, how are you?"
I miss her,
he said.
"Me too. We'll see her on the weekend."
Look, Jane. That's Cassiopeia.
Gary pointed his finger at the dark starry sky. Then, sitting on the railing, he pointed in another direction.
And there, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. It's strange that I remember that.
Jane felt a strong surge of love and tenderness for her husband. Such a feeling hadn't visited her for a long time, except perhaps in the early days of their marriage. She pressed herself against Gary's chest, embracing him tightly.
"You don't mind, do you?"
No.
Gary was clearly puzzled.
"You know, since you've come home, we haven't made love even once. If you feel uncomfortable, we could talk about it."
Yes, I'm a little nervous,
he replied.
A bit nervous.
And then he added in a very soft voice,
I'm very nervous.
"Why?"
Well, okay. I saw a movie, and they did it there. And I don't know if I can do it the way that guy did.
Jane smiled, seeing her husband's strong embarrassment.
"Don't worry, I'll help you. Here."
She began unbuttoning her shirt.
"Touch me, Gary."
He very cautiously, trembling with excitement, touched Jane. They kissed. Morning came. Gary and Jane were lying in bed. After an intimate night with his wife, Gary felt as if a new, unexplored, wonderful world had opened up for him. He was absolutely happy, relishing the memories of the previous night. The thing is, Gary's amnesia also affected his intimate sphere. After being shot, he became a man who had never experienced intimacy with a woman. And this night with his wife was, in every sense, his first in his new life, starting from scratch.
Jane.
Yes, darling.
Tell me how we met.
Oh, it was at Dick Marvin's birthday party. You were a promising young lawyer. And I was answering phone calls at a fashion magazine. I was standing there, smoking. I used to smoke back then. And you came up to me. I'm Gary, you said. And you're beautiful.
Really?
Gary smiled.
Yes. I immediately felt important. You had such a look that I couldn't resist. We forgot about everyone else and chatted the whole evening. And the girl you came with got angry. When you were leaving, you handed me your business card and asked, "Have you ever tried the French dish, Dominique Pyron? I know a great place where they serve it."
Gary laughed, as at the moment he had no idea what she was talking about. But he apparently really liked the story of their meeting.
You made me laugh. When I came home, I told my roommate that I met a guy I would marry,
she said. Gary was overwhelmed with tender love for his wife.
Is there anything better in this world than what I'm experiencing right now?
He thought, and he hugged Jane tightly. They went to see the new house that Jane had found. The apartment in Manhattan was too big and burdensome for them.
I like this house, Jane.
They kissed. Gary was unrecognizable, he was so gentle, so affectionate with his wife. Jane was happy with everything that was happening. Her husband loved her again, and they regained the relationship they had lost long ago, almost immediately after their marriage. Due to his demanding law practice, he hadn't been giving any time to his wife or daughter. Gary had always been indifferent and harsh. Now everything had changed.
Oh, God, may it always be like this. May he never remember the person he used to be.
Jane thought. Their second honeymoon began. Jane and Gary walked down the street, discussing how they would furnish their new home.
And should we keep the dining table?
Gary asked.
But you didn't like it because it looked like a turtle,
Jane replied.
No, on the contrary, I actually like it because it looks like a turtle.
They laughed. Gary took Jane's hand. She looked at her hand in his with undisguised surprise.
Don't you like it?
Gary asked.
No, of course I do.
She said.
Then why are you looking like that?
Because you've never held my hand before.
Why?
You didn't like showing affection in public. It annoyed you.
Why?
I don't know.
You don't know why, Jane? And I don't either.
Gary replied, abruptly jumping onto a bench they were passing by and pulling Jane along with him.
What are you doing?
She laughed in surprise.
Get up here with me, Jane. It doesn't bother me anymore.
After saying those words, he started kissing her, standing right on the bench.
Jane!
They heard Christie's bewildered voice. Jane and Gary turned to see their stunned friend standing opposite them. Christie was clearly shocked by what her respectable friend had been up to, standing on a bench and passionately kissing each other like lovesick teenagers.
Hi, Christie.
Jane replied, embarrassed but very happy.
I was actually going to call you.
Christie mumbled, clearly shocked by what the lovebirds were doing. Christie's husband smirked, enjoying the situation that could never fit into the norms of high society behavior. But Gary and Jane didn't care anymore. They had already broken free from the suffocating and artificial captivity of pretentious hypocrisy. They were simply happy.
Gary, meet my friends.
Jane introduced them to Gary.
Jane, I was actually trying to reach you. I want to invite you to a housewarming party at our luxurious apartment in Manhattan that I recently bought. Will you come?
Yes, of course.
Then see you on Friday. Come at 7 in the evening. I'll call to remind you. Kisses.
Goodbye. Kisses.
Jane replied. The happy couple continued laughing and kissing while sitting on a bench. Gary sat in his office at the law firm and couldn't find peace.
I still need to resolve this case completely. I just can't leave it like this.
He thought about the Anderson versus Hospital case.
Miss Doolittle.
He addressed his secretary.
Could you bring me the case regarding the hospital?
Oh, sir. I can't.
Why?
I was told not to give you old cases. I'm sorry, sir.
Gary sighed and disappointedly slammed the door of his office. The party was in full swing, with black caviar and the finest champagne being served. The cream of high society had gathered at the party. But Gary felt somewhat uncomfortable and out of place. Although he used to be at ease at such events, everything had changed now. The old Gary was no more. He had become a new person, simple, modest and kind-hearted. While Jane chatted with her girlfriends, he finally found a like-minded conversation partner.
7 brothers and sisters?
Yes, sir.
It's really hot in Memphis, isn't it?
Undoubtedly, sir.
Gary stood and politely conversed with the old butler, sampling various appetizers from the tray the butler held. Jane approached them.
How are you?
I really like these little sandwiches. That lady in red said they were awful. And that lady in black caked on so much makeup but forgot about her neck. And that man said she should wear a gas mask. It would look better on her.
Jane and the old servant laughed.
Darling, let's go over to Christy. She's my best friend, and I want to introduce you to her.
Jane, spotting Christy among her friends, headed towards them with Gary. They approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt the conversation, and decided to wait until there was a pause. The group didn't notice them and continued their discussion.
What a pity. He used to be an excellent lawyer,
Christy's husband said.
A year ago, Gary was the best of the best. Everyone admired him.
Christy continued.
But I've known Jane for a very long time.
I heard he returned to work.
Christy's friend chimed in.
And what does he achieve as a result?
Christy's husband joined in.
He's earning money for nothing. He's settled and just fine.
I don't feel sorry for Gary, but poor Jane.
Lamented Christy to her friends.
Now she has 2 kids.
Christy's companion chuckled.
Yes.
Christy replied.
What awaits her in the future?
What a nightmare.
Added Christy's friend.
Oh God, today you're a lawyer, and tomorrow you're a lunatic.
Christy's husband joked.
Not such a long way to go.
The friend playfully agreed. They all laughed together, but then they finally noticed Gary and Jane standing behind them. The expressions on the couple's faces clearly showed that they had heard everything. Jane was taken aback by such hypocrisy.
Christy.
Jane slowly spoke, recovering from the shock.
I'm afraid we won't be able to stay for dinner. I wanted to say
goodbye
To you and thank you for the evening.
Then they quickly turned around and left, without waiting for any response from a greatly embarrassed Christy.
Damn.
Christy could only sigh deeply. At that moment, she realized that she had lost her friend forever. Morning came, Jane was getting ready for work, while Gary lay in bed, completely unsure how to react to the world of hypocrisy, lies and self-righteousness that he suddenly found himself in. Jane approached him and sat on the edge of the bed, saying,
Don't let these people hurt you. They don't really know you. Darling.
I won't go to work today.
Gary responded apathetically, wrapping himself even tighter in the blanket. And so, the whole day passed. Jane entered the bedroom, turning on the light.
Dear. I invited someone.
Bradley!
Gary exclaimed in surprise as he saw the silhouette of his dear friend, the same masseur who taught him how to walk again. They went to the kitchen to talk.
So, what's the matter?
Bradley asked with pleasure, taking a sip of expensive beer.
I thought I could go back to my old life,
Gary said.
But I don't like who I used to be, Bradley. I'm not suited for it.
Bradley pondered for a couple of seconds.
I have broken knees,
he said.
What?
My knees, they're broken. Ask me why.
Bradley continued.
Why?
Football. I broke them playing football for my college. It was the meaning of my life. What else could it be? How did it happen? That jerk made an amazing throw. He threw a perfect spiral and I caught the ball.
Smiling with pleasure, he continued, settling down at the kitchen table with Gary.
The ball was flying straight at me, and that defender flew at me with such force that he knocked me down. I fell on my knees and felt them crack. And then I realized, the game was over, forget about it, I'm a dead man. Your life is over, Bradley, I told myself then.
Gary listened attentively.
And now, Gary, ask me if I mourn my knees.
Do you mourn, Bradley?
Gary repeated, feeling embarrassed.
Not at all. It was a trial. I had to find life. The doctor who taught me to walk again was a cool guy. And I thought I wanted to be like him. When I told my friends about it, they laughed at me. They called me a nurse, bought me a white coat and stockings. But look at yourself. You walk, don't you? You talk. You're sitting here drinking pretty expensive beer. And I have something to do with it. If it weren't for my knees, we would have never met. So I don't mourn my knees, and let me tell you, Gary, don't listen to those who tell you who you are. Be patient, and you'll figure it out yourself.
Gary's face underwent noticeable changes as he listened to Bradley. There was no trace of depression left. He smiled.
Thanks,
said Gary.
Ha! It would be a great story if we'd won the game.
Friends burst into sincere laughter. The next day, Gary made a phone call to his daughter's private school.
Hello, this is Sarah's father. I would like to know how she's doing. What did you say? No, I'm not sure if it's urgent, but I received a letter from her recently, and she seems upset. I thought I could cheer her up somehow.
At that time, the doorbell rang. A courier delivered a package.
Yeah, got it. I understand. I'll call her back after 6, thanks.
Harry hung up the phone.
This is for you, Mr. Gary,
said the housekeeper, handing Gary a package.
And you know what, Mr. Gary?
She said, already leaving the room.
Sorry, but I like you better the way you are now.
The package was from Bill, his old friend. It contained a letter that said,
I hope you'll like your new home, Bill.
The letter was written on expensive blue paper with Bill's logo. Gary almost set it aside and started opening the present box that was also in the package. But then he had a sudden memory that he had seen similar envelopes and paper before. He went into the bedroom where their wardrobe was. Opening a couple of drawers one by one, he found the box he had peeked into out of curiosity when he first arrived, exploring his new home.
Yes, this is exactly the same box, and it has the same kind of envelopes, similar to the one that was just delivered to me. They were among Jane's things.
Gary opened one of the envelopes.
Jane, I need you right now. I feel you drifting away from me. Call me today. Bill.
Gary read aloud and understood everything. Jane was cheating on him with Bill, his best friend. Joyful Jane entered the apartment and announced that the house now officially belonged to them. But instead of happiness, Gary raised his hand and showed her Bill's letters.
Oh my God.
Jane exclaimed in horror.
Gary!
It happened before?
Oh, God, please.
Before I was shot. You slept with Bill before?
It didn't last long. He kept writing to me, but it didn't last. Things were different then, and you were different.
I don't remember what I was like back then.
Gary shouted loudly in pain, throwing the letters against the wall, and abruptly started to leave.
Listen to me.
Jane yelled after him, trying to catch up.
Our relationship was falling apart. We were miserable. You don't remember, but I do. I was lonely. We were in love once, years ago, but then we grew apart. It's different now. We're better now. Please don't walk away. Not now.
Gary left the house and headed to his office in the law company. Upon seeing his friend, Bill entered his office following Gary. But Gary quickly grabbed his large portfolio with documents and headed back without saying him anything.
Please, please. Talk to me.
Bill was pleading with Gary, but Gary left silent. On the way, he noticed the sign on the hotel, the Graham Hotel. Gary started to recall something again, and he clearly remembered that name.
It turns out, Graham is not just the name of a cracker.
He entered the hotel, booked a room for himself, and checked in for an indefinite period of time. Suddenly, there was a knock on his door. He opened it, and the young beautiful woman, Eden, his colleague with whom he had sat in the restaurant with Bill when he was talking to them about the unfair outcome of the Anderson versus the hospital case, entered the room.
I followed you.
Look, I don't have anything to say.
I think we should talk.
Well, I don't.
Bill was right. You were different. You shouldn't take it all out on him. He's been a good friend to you. Bill took over your cases. He took care of things.
He sure did.
Bill is so humiliated.
He's humiliated. Look, Eden, I know Bill is a friend of yours, and I know that you mean well, but this is not a good time for me.
Gary, this isn't any fun for me either.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about us. You're not the only one who lost in this. I lost too. I lost the one man I ever loved, and it was you, Gary. It's hard to see you every day in the office, and you don't know me. It was our hotel. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we would meet at the Graham Hotel.
The Graham.
Gary repeated thoughtfully.
You were going to leave Jane for me. Now it's all over. There's nothing. Gary!
Eden urged the man.
No.
Gary replied, his face filled with immense confusion, and he left his room. He wandered around the city in deep thought, and in the end, he decided to visit the wife of Mr. Anderson, the man he deceived and framed in court. He rang her doorbell. An elderly woman opened the door.
Mrs. Anderson?
What are you doing here?
The surprised woman replied.
Do you remember me?
We remember you, Mr. Corner.
I came to apologize.
Are you mocking me?
No. I'm serious. Give this to your lawyer,
Gary said and handed her an important document.
What is this?
The woman asked, taking the paper from him.
Your husband told the nurse that he's a diabetic. All the evidence is here. Please forgive me.
But why? Why are you doing this?
I've changed.
That's evident.
Goodbye.
After that, he hurriedly headed to the law firm, to his boss's office. Gary ignored the secretary's warning that he was busy and still went to his office. There were many foreign guests in the office.
Sir, I came to say goodbye,
Gary said to his boss.
All right, Gary, see you tomorrow.
No, you don't understand. I can't work as a lawyer anymore. Thank you, you've been very kind to me.
The boss was surprised, quickly said goodbye to the foreign guests, and approached Gary.
Wait, we'll discuss everything.
I can't wait. Goodbye,
Gary said.
Goodbye, Gary. Well, good luck to you.
At that moment, his secretary approached the boss.
Sir, there's a lawyer of Mr. Anderson waiting for you on line 3.
Good luck to you too,
Gary said to his boss and headed towards the exit. Gary also said goodbye to his secretary and Eden. After that, he immediately went home to his wife. He rang the doorbell. Jane opened it. Gary said to her the very words he spoke at the beginning of their acquaintance.
I know a place that serves the French dish Dominique Piron.
Upon hearing these romantic words, Jane cried tears of happiness.
Forgive me.
No, you forgive me.
Gary replied.
You were right, everything was different back then.
Gary.
She said and threw herself into his arms.
I want to tell you something,
Interrupted Gary the sweet moment of their embrace.
What?
I don't like my clothes. They used to be my favorite, but now I don't want to wear them.
We'll buy new ones.
That's not all. I don't like omelets and steaks. Jane, I hate being a lawyer. I quit and said goodbye to my boss. I want us to be a family again, like we were in the beginning, Jane, once upon a time.
I love you.
And I love you too, Jane.
Jane and Gary decided to retrieve their daughter from the despised by her yet prestigious school in the so-called upper society. They entered the classroom, interrupting the ongoing lessons.
Mr. Corner, we're in the middle of class,
said the strict teacher.
I know, I apologize for interrupting. I just missed my daughter for the first time in these 11 years, and I don't want to miss her anymore.
I'm glad you're recovering, Mr. Corner.
Excuse us.
They approached their daughter and said to her,
Let's go home.
They all happily embraced, left the school, and headed home together, never to be separated again. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this touching story, please subscribe, like the video and comment. See you on our channel.